Hey everybody, Bobby Medina here with my very dear friend and compadre Paul Barron, and we are bringing you a very special interview with somebody who I've heard of since I was a kid. You too, right, Paul?
Yep.
And he's a legend in the trumpet world. Originally from Dallas, Texas, he earned his BM in trumpet performance from the Eastman School of Music. He has his master's degree in theory and composition from Ball State University. He is a former member of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, the Royal Ballet and American Ballet Theater, the Victoria Symphony, the Canadian Broadcasting Company in Vancouver, and has also recorded extensively for major motion pictures and television studios. He's also been a member of the Dallas and Milwaukee Symphonies, assistant principal of the Rochester Philharmonic, and first trumpet with the Marlborough Festival Orchestra, to name just a few. So, welcome, Boyde Hood. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing as much as I can.
Well, hi, Boyd.
Hi, Paul.
One of my regrets, and we talked about this before we started recording, was that when you were, I think it was 7 years you were in Victoria.
Mm.
I never did get over there. I grew up in Vancouver, and I really should have gotten to Victoria to take a lesson, and I never did. So, for me, my own interest sake, and everybody watching, I'd love to hear your story about how you got to Victoria and your time there, and then your transition down to the LA Philharmonic and into the studio scene there.
Okay, well, my third year at Ball State, I had finished my master's degree in theory and composition while on the faculty there. And that spring, a job opened at the University of Tennessee, basically doing what I was doing at Ball State, the trumpet professor, the brass quintet, Knoxville Symphony. And I auditioned and was offered, the position. And literally the next day, two very dear friends from school, George Corwin and Les Thimick, uh, called me and said that there was a position open at UVic for a composer in the theory department.
So that's the University of Victoria, just for
University of
everybody.
Victoria,
Yeah.
yes. And so I went out and I interviewed for that and just really loved it. And I came back, discussed it with my wife, and we both said, well, I guess we're heading west. So I came to the university, and for 2 years, I was on the theory and composition faculty. I taught the first year theory course, the orchestration course, first 2 years of composition. And at the end of the second year, UVic was getting, the faculty was expanding. When I joined, there were 6 members on the faculty. I mean, a faculty meeting was, I don't know, what do you want to do? But as we expanded, I had already started, a brass thing going at the university and was offered the option to either stay in theory and composition or move to performance. And so, no, I was just realizing that I was really a theory and composition geek, but my love was performance, the trumpet, brass music, all of that. So I moved into performance. And at the end of my seventh year in Victoria, in fact, I might mention that while I was in Victoria, I taught for 7 years at the Courtney Youth Music Center, which was a wonderful summer kind of camp that I think initially was sponsored in some ways by the Vancouver Symphony, but was under a Canada Council grant.
It was.
Uh,
You're correct. I taught there as a teacher's assistant a couple of summers. Great time up there, so I know it well.
yeah, it was really fun. So in my seventh year at university, I applied for a sabbatical leave. And we were thinking about where we would like to go. And I think it was in 76 that the LA Philharmonic came and played a concert at the Queen Elizabeth Hall. And I met all the guys. I had friends, Roger Bobo, Ralph Sauer. We'd all been in school together. But I met Tom Stevens, Mario Guarnieri, uh, and everyone was talking about Jimmy Stamp. And I'd heard about Jimmy, but that sort of, the more I talked to them, that sort of seemed to be a logical thing to do with the sabbatical. To come to Los Angeles, and study with Jimmy. I had friends in the studios. I had friends in the Philharmonic, and I'd seen a lot of friends go to Europe, and come back with credit cards kind of maxed out. And I thought, well, let's see how this might go because one, we speak the language, so it was just kind of one of those ideas that came, clearer as my wife and I talked about it. So I called Jimmy and told him what I was planning on doing, applying for the sabbatical, and would he accept me as a student? And as you know, with Jimmy, he was just wonderful. He did. And so we came down in August of 1977 and got settled in a house that we were renting in Sherman Oaks. And Ray Kelly, who had been a colleague of mine in the Dallas Symphony, he and his then wife Jan really helped us so much. Helped us find a place to live, and as did Ralph and Linda Sauer. I mean, they were all just so great. And so one of the things that initially I started my lessons with Jimmy, which I really enjoyed. And what I would do there is go in an hour early because I remember Jimmy arrived at 9. My lesson was at 10. So I would watch him teach because I was on sabbatical. I wanted to really get as much of him as I could. So I would watch him teach an hour, then I would have my lesson and then stay for another lesson or two until lunch. And of course, we would play quartets there, and that was really, everything was starting to really settle in with the lessons with him. And at the same time, Ray Kelly had invited me to go to film calls with him because I told him I was interested in seeing what that whole scene was like and did he think it was possible. And he said, sure, you can come with me anytime. And so I started going to film calls with Ray, and I met all of the guys, Graham Young, George Worth, Ewan Racy, young Malcolm, just so many people, Warren Looning, and great players. Yeah. And on one of the calls at CBS Radford, which became Todd AO here in town, we walked in and Ray went over to check, see what he was doing. And I sat down on the wall and Ray came back and I said, so what are you doing? He said, well, it's a Wednesday night at the movies with a composer I've never worked with. So really, who's that? He said, Fred Karlin. I said, Fred Karlin? Well, I'd worked with Ray Wright and Fred Karlin at the Eastman School. During the summertime, there was the Arrangers Workshop. And in the Arrangers Workshop, basically arrangers came in and they had, as the lab, in the mornings, we had an octet, trumpet, trombone, alto, tenor, bari, rhythm section, afternoon, a big band, 4/4/5 in the rhythm section. Last 2 weeks, it expanded to a studio orchestra. So I'd worked with Fred for a couple of summers. And, I thought, Fred. And so I stood up and he was coming around the corner out of the booth and he looked and he said, Red? I said, hey, Fred, how you doing? And so we talked briefly and he said, well, look, give Rich Vetrano, his copyist, give Rich your phone number. I've got to go to work here. And so I gave Rich my phone number and went around and sat behind Graham Young because Graham, was really great. He would say, okay, good, just sit back over here, And so I thought Fred and Meg and Donnie and I would get together and have supper or something. And 2 weeks later, the phone rang and it was the service. and it said, Boyd, could you take a 2 o'clock single at MGM on October, I think it was Monday, October the 10th, something around there. And I said, yes. And she said, that's great. It's with Fred Carlin. And it's what was it? The Man from Atlantis. It was a science fiction TV show. And so I went out and I got there early, and I walked in, and Graham looked up. It was Graham and George Worth. Graham looked up and said, "Hey, Boyd, how are you? Come on in. We'll find you a chair," you know. And George Worth tapped Graham on the leg and he said, "Graham, I think that chair right next to you is Boyd's chair." And Graham looked and he said, "Hey, all right, come on in. Let's get you settled." Well, because I'd gone around to all the studio calls, it wasn't, "Oh my God, who the heck is that guy?" I knew Graham, and as I said, I'd been on 3 or 4 movie calls, just sitting behind him, and so I got settled in, and the first big cue, I should say, that sitting in front of us was Dick Nash, Lord Uliate, George Roberts, Tommy Johnson. And then the horn section was a Vince horn section. It was Vince, Rich Parisi, David Duke, Art Mavi. I mean, and I was just sitting there. I had to calm myself down because these are people that many I'd known since high school. On the old Capitol records or the Shorty Rogers records, those. I knew that Graham was Mancini's first call player. So it was a matter of kind of calming myself down a bit, saying, no, this is what I love doing. Well, we did the first cue, which was a 3-page chase scene. And we rehearsed it. Fred did the levels, first violin, second violins, et cetera, all around the orchestra. Then we played it all together and it was balanced. And Fred was so efficient, man, we would go. Well, we put down the first chase scene, and I don't know what the look was like on my face, but Graham turned to me and he said, "It's going to be kind of hard to go back to Victoria, huh?" And I said, "Oh my God." Because I had forgotten what it was like to play on that level. I mean, I loved the orchestra in Victoria is terrific, but when you're sitting in that kind of a setting with those players, it was just such an extraordinary experience that I realized that, I may have a decision to make here sometime, but I was still thinking about just sabbatical leave because we couldn't imagine leaving Victoria. We loved it so much, and we loved the faculty. I loved the orchestra. I was very involved, in negotiating contracts and things with the Symphony, and it was just our life there was so good. But that first studio call, as I said, that's playing on another level. It was like the first time I played extra with the LA Philharmonic, Mahler second. I was playing first off stage and then assisting Tom on stage. That was another world. And so after that call, I remember coming home, and then next day I got another call from Fred for the Man from Atlantis the next week. I came home, and I think my wife could tell that there was something going on, So she and I talked about it, and she was wonderful. I sat down and I was just going on and on about the guys and what we were doing. And she looked at me and she said, "We're not going back, are we?" I said, "Oh gosh, no, babe, we're going back, certainly." She said, "We're not going back. I'm going to have to find a job. There's an opening at the Buckley School that Ray and Jan had told her about." She said, I'll call them and see if I can interview. The Buckley School is a private school here in Sherman Oaks. And I said, no, but let's just kind of think. She said, "No, it's okay. You'll do fine. I know you will do well." And my grandmother was staying with us at the time. She had come out. And I remember Mary, Donnie went out to start supper, and Mary turned to me and said, "She is really quite amazing, isn't she?" And I said, "Yes, she's always been quite amazing." And so we saw it that whole fall. I started to work for Fred. I played extra with the Philharmonic a couple of times. And I just felt at home doing that. And so Fred started using me. And about that time, he called Sandy the Crescent. She was a contractor at Universal. And he told her about me and said, would it be okay if Boyd came over and watched, a session? And she said, of course. So I went over and I met Sandy. And it was a Kojak that they were doing, and Joe Harnell did all the Kojaks, the Incredible Hulk, the Magician, those TV shows. Mm-hmm. And that was where I met Warren Looney on one of the breaks. And so I met Sandy and and Joe and had a great time. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I was about to walk out the door. Around 10:01, I had some errands to run, and the phone rang, and I thought, well, I'll let the service get it. And I thought, no. So I picked it up, and it was the service, and one of the girls said, I'm so glad you picked up. Can you take a 1 o'clock today at Universal with Sam? And I said, yes, I might be a little late. She said, that's okay, because she's going to start with a 10. A lot of the people who were on that date in the afternoon were on a movie call, and Warren was one of them, on a movie call that suddenly had gotten held over, for the extra hour. And so I came in, and this is how I think small things work. Got settled in. It was an Incredible Hulk. And so we did the first hour, and in the second hour, we put down a cue, and we were listening back, and all of a sudden Joe said, wait, stop. He said, Boyd, yeah? I said, yeah. He said, in bar 46, why did you suddenly play so softly? It's got to be forte there. I said, well, in the part, it says mezzo piano. He said, no, it's forte. I said, well, it says mezzo piano. I'll change it. And he came walking back, and he looked, and he said, it does say mezzo piano. He said, now that's paying attention to detail. And he looked at Sandy and went. And I thought, okay, I guess that was a good thing to do, just play the ink. And when I left, I waved at Sandy, said, thank you very much. And he looked, and I said, thanks, Joe, it was great. He said, good job. Well, because of that one thing, I became Warren's kind of sub on those TV things, because he was doing all of Joe Harnell's stuff. And but there were times when he would have a conflict. Sandy had him on a big film, and so I just sort of began to work in that way. With Fred, I was playing for a variety of conductors, and I was playing for and composers, but also a variety of contractors. So I not only worked with Lloyd Basham, who was, for that first part of that first year, Lloyd was a contractor in town who was retiring. So then whatever Fred was doing kind of depended on the production company. So I got to work for Carl Fortuna at Paramount. I got to work for Marion Klein. I got to work for all the guys, Harold Lajewski at MGM, Mike Rubin.
An incredible unfolding of events all within a 1 year, because for some people it takes decades for them to get from that point A to point B.
I know, really, and I just felt so fortunate. And a lot of this, in fact, all of it, I felt was really due to Fred. That he introduced me to some people. I had chances to do things, and often you think, what if I hadn't have picked up the phone, had gone out on errands? That wouldn't have happened. And so it just, as my dad used to say, whatever could have happened did. And the same thing happened. A good friend of mine was Tex Balk, who was a wonderful horn player. And Tex played for, he was working with the American Ballet Theater and the Royal Ballet, working for Tilda Palma. who was the contractor for the ballets back then. Well, one night Tex came over to have supper, and he was going to leave his bike uh, in the in our garage. We had a closed off driveway, and he said, "Can you take me down to the boat? And then what I'll do is just get a ride back here, and I'll just pick up the bike." I said, "Okay, I'll just leave the gate, unlocked so you can get back in." And so I went down and I met Till De Palma, and we were talking, and I went to Eastman and Till went to Curtis, and that kind of conversation. Well, in December, uh, Tex called me and he said, "Boyd," he said, "I think Till is going to call you." He just called me and said that both of the conductors of the Royal Ballet and the American Ballet Theater, who were coming in the spring, they wanted all of the principal players to be there for the entire run. And he said that Tony Blow, Russ Kidd, and Malcolm can't do that. And so he had called Tex and said, "Tex, is this something that Boyd can do?" And Tex said, "Yeah, that's right down his alley." And so Till called me and he said, "Can you take this entire run on all of them?" And I said, "Yes, of course I can. I'll be happy to." And so that was where I began to work with the Royal Ballet, Jack Lanchbury, and the American Ballet Theater. It was just one of those lucky things for me, because Tony and Russ were in the chamber orchestra, they were in the Pasadena Symphony, they were doing a lot of stuff. And Malcolm was starting to work in the studios by that time. So he couldn't say, "I'll take the whole run of whatever." And so that was very fortunate as well, that I got that opportunity, and it just kind of worked out. And it was the next year that Tony and I were doing, I think it was in spring of '79, we were doing the Bolshoi Ballet. And Tony said, "Boyd, by the way," because he said, "Could you take a couple of students at USC?" Tom Stevens, who had been doing it, he said, "Tom is not going to be there this year. He's starting." I guess they were still doing a lot of stuff with the new music, and Bob Duvall was thinking about retiring at some point, and so Tom was putting everything into the Philharmonic. And so that's how I started at USC. I took a few students there. And then it was one of those things. It was unfortunate. John Kleiman, he was legendary, the first trumpet at Fox and everything. John had always had heart problems. And he was a big guy, man. I mean, but he had a heart attack. I think it was the year, maybe 80 or 81. It was before I joined the Philharmonic. And so I started doing more of the trumpet studio. And then Tony came to me, I think it was in 80 or 81, and said, he said, "Look," he said, I want to do more with my solo career. And I think he was going to play first trumpet in Malmo, Sweden. And he wanted to get
I
things.
saw him when he played trumpet in Malmo, Sweden. I remember that.
Yeah,
My wife
yeah.
is Swedish and lived outside of that area. I had lived over there for a little while, so I remember.
Uh-huh.
I met him when I was in college for just a moment. So yeah,
Yeah.
great guy and a great player and composer too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he was doing a lot of composing here in town. Well, Tony and I got to know each other because he was on the faculty at Northridge. And I had played he had written some trumpet ensembles and things. And I had, played on his recital there and helped him. I think I conducted a piece for him. And so we had become friends, and we're, now and then would do film calls together, or would do basically live things. So, but at that time, he then was only going to keep his students. He wasn't accepting freshmen or master students who were transferring. So within a year or two, Tony was no longer on the faculty, and I'd taken over the studio. And it was, it was fine. I was doing the bulk of it. And then SC had always had 2 or 3 teachers. So Bob Wojcik asked about, he said, I think it would be good to have, for the students to have some options. And that was when I recommended Roy Poker to Bob. And I'm sure that probably, and Bob asked other people like Terry Cravens, that Terry would have recommended Roy too. But Roy joined the faculty, but I was still doing the, kind of the bulk of it. So that was kind of how everything just kind of worked in.
So is this all within the 1 year, or are we into?
This is all, the first year I started working for Fred, and I kind of became Warren's backup with Sandy. And then she used me on a couple of things on her own. That was in 77 that began to happen. 78 was the American Ballet Theater, the Royal Ballet.
So now you're officially moved to LA by this point?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
Donnie and I talked about it. She interviewed for the job at Buckley and was offered the position. I mean, she was an incredibly beautiful girl. And she always would say, well, I went in and did my Dana Winter act, so they hired me. And I say, okay, pretty, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that. And she became the chairman of the English department there after a while. Was on the faculty for 23, 24 years before she became ill. So she got a job on the faculty. She accepted it. And, with the idea that if we did go back, then, obviously she could say, I'm not able to do it. But we decided to think about it. We were pretty sure that we were going to stay, but I wanted to think about it until the new year began. And by that point, we had gone to visit my sisters who were living in Colorado then. And when we came back, we both said, we're good, because I'd gotten the offer for the Royal Ballet, American Ballet Theater. Both Tom Stevens, Roger Bobo, people kept saying, if you stay in town, I think you'll do okay. And so I called the chairman of the department because I couldn't keep accepting the money from UVic. I was on, sabbatical leave, I think 2/3 pay. And so I called the chairman and the department, and it was Rudolph Commerce who was doing it at that point. And Rudolph said, well, this is the phone call I've been dreading. I said, well, Rudolph, you know how much I love the university, you know how much I love the faculty, how committed I am to everything there. But there's a Y in the road, and I've always dreamed of doing this. And first of all, I cannot keep, accepting the money from, the university. And I wanted you to know right away. And he appreciated that, so that you can start to look for someone. And there was someone teaching there in the interim for me, but then they opened it up, and that's when Louis Ranger took the position. And I think Louis retired from there now, but he was both the trumpet professor and head of the department for a while. From what Ed Birdwell told me, that Louis' wife, a few years ago, that Louis' wife is like the Dorothy DeLay of Canada now, that she's really quite famous. So I officially resigned from the university in January. And and then suddenly that was the first time in my life that I had never had either an orchestra and or a university job. I'd never freelanced, as a kid. But here I had, we had an 11 and a 7-year-old. And I remember in May, my last studio call with Fred, I had nothing for the summer at all. Dawn was starting in September at Buckley. And I came home after the studio call, and I was in one of my kind of moods. And I poured some bourbon. I was talking to her, and I was saying, pretty, I hope we haven't made a mistake. We have the whole summer, and there's nothing. I have nothing in the books. I just hope it's going to be okay. And as she always did, she just sat and was looking at me with her glass of Chardonnay. And finally, when I quit, she looked at me. And this is the best advice I ever got, in particular to the circumstance and as a general metaphor. She looked at me and she said, "Boyd, we are walking across the Grand Canyon on a tightrope. Just don't look down and don't give up."
That's
Best
great
piece of
advice.
advice
I
I
think
ever
that's
got in my
awesome.
life.
I think that's incredible. I think a lot of us feel like that have been freelancers or started our own businesses or whatever.
Yeah,
Our mind can get in the way sometimes. How about if we switch gears here, if you don't mind? This
that's
is
great.
so interesting to hear all these things and how your life has unfolded. But let's talk about trumpet a little bit here
Okay.
specifically. There's been some discussions in our group regarding Jimmy Stamp, and
Uh-huh.
myself as a former student of his. I'm just curious to find out how you've used his principles in your teaching. I think it's so cool that you got to go observe other lessons, and watch what he did. I mean, you could have come to like two of mine, and he had to pull out every trick in the book to get me out of my slump. But anyways, I'd love to hear a little bit more, and maybe you can give some advice on how to use. We can talk about maybe one or two techniques that you feel people can
Mhm.
apply to their playing.
Well, the first thing I found with observing Jimmy's teaching was that he reminded me an awful lot of Emory Remington at the Eastman School,
Hmm.
the great trombone professor there. Jimmy had his way of approaching things, as you well know. I mean, you would start with the lip buzzing, and then you would start with mouthpiece playing, and then you would go to the trumpet and begin to play his exercises. And the thing that I found with his teaching was that it was very, in a good way, very simple. And by saying simple, it was very direct. There was nothing uncluttered in the way that Jimmy did things, as I know you know about. I was very direct in how he dealt with it. He had ways of working with each student, but it got back to the same place. And that was always getting you in the right spot on your, on your face with your embouchure. Because the thing with us is that we're artists, but we're also athletes. We are doing the same thing here, and with our lips that singers do. Brass players are the closest to singers. And that's always where that old idea of singing with your lips came from. And I think Jimmy even mentioned that a couple of times. Always that sense of lyricism in the playing. And so the consistent things that I found were, one, that the lip buzzing, he always started with that. Now I felt better. I had designed with Merle Hireman when I was in Milwaukee in '64 a visualizer, because when I was studying with Herseth, he had recommended the larger mouthpiece. He played on a Queen Anne bass trumpet mouthpiece and the visualizer. And I had one. I didn't like the normal visualizer, so we basically cut out the inside of a trumpet mouthpiece, and so that's how I did lip buzzing. But in lessons, and for that year, I worked with the lip buzzing to just see what the effects were, and they really helped. But we would start with the lip buzzing, then go to the mouthpiece, and everything would get set in the right way on the mouthpiece, and then go to the horn. And one thing I'd realized as a student, and I heard Jimmy mentioning it to students as well, but when I was at Eastman, I would be doing mouthpiece playing, and sometimes I'd start to play the horn, and it just wasn't the same. Something didn't. And finally, I think it was when I was a sophomore, I played a F concert on the mouthpiece out of my trumpet, and I thought, oh, that's a little bit different than I've been doing, and things got better. And that was one thing I noticed that Jimmy mentioned all the time to his students, to make sure the horn angle, was
Absolutely.
right. The thing there too was the step that he drew. Simply, he would say, I asked him one time, and Malcolm and I've talked about this because he asked the same question. He said, I said, so what is the most important note? And he said, the most important note in a phrase is the note you're leaving. And that always made sense to me
Oh.
because I always felt like the anacrusis should be long, that the shape of the interior note should lead forward, but that you didn't leave the note too soon, either going up or going down, which of course led him to that very straightforward stay up to go down, stay down to go up.
Right.
And it was so, the procedures were so direct, they were so clear that then it was a matter of that you just breathe and breathe and play. I mean, Jimmy always had mentioned up and then play. My teacher, Mr. Resch in Dallas, who really formed my foundation when I was a kid, would say, suck back. So it was essentially the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was those simple, direct approaches to things that I've carried into my teaching, both from my first teacher, Mr. Resch, to really my last teacher, Jimmy. Is that directed? Is that basically that foundation? Because then you have something to build on, and that's what I call triggers. So I mean, I always think of having the gum line, and then ah and sigh, and then and just connect there to sound. So because we're in this incredible calibration device, and if I think our main job is just to get the heck out of our way. And if you have these triggers, those triggers are getting the calibration device to the endeavor. I mean, when you turn on a light, I don't care about the switch and the lights and the wiring. I care if the light goes on. Well, it's the same thing with us. With these triggers, what you do in a very simple way is access the body in the most beneficial way, in the most natural way for you. And this is what I saw in those triggers that Jimmy had, that they did for his students. And I know, Bobby, you had firsthand knowledge with that, because a lot of times he would say the same thing again and again. And that wasn't because the student couldn't remember, it's that you need those reminders. Because even practicing, you can forget them.
He just had an uncanny way of bringing you back to your, what Paul and I call home base.
Yes.
And I was a young, brash kid that had been playing in marching band and in drum and bugle corps. I was playing on the weekends in this polka band, and I was playing just way too much and way too loud and way too hard. And my lessons one semester were like on Tuesday or something like that, Wednesday maybe. And I just remember him asking me, like, he'd call me his wounded soldier. And how's my wounded soldier doing
That's
today? Are you
great.
able to play? Because sometimes when I had played really hard in the week, on the weekend, I wouldn't be able to play for a couple of days,
Oh,
literally
yeah.
so hard. And what was just incredible about him that I've never experienced on my own or with anyone since is that he could take me from my most trashed chops
Mhm.
to playing absolutely refined and feeling amazing
Mhm.
in a matter, and I'm not lying when I say this, in a matter of maybe 8 minutes, 10
Yeah.
minutes, I
Yeah.
was going again as if nothing happened. And it was amazing. I mean, my first lesson with him was learning how to lip buzz, and I had never experienced. I had airy tone, all that stuff.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
totally cleared up my sound, got me on the mouthpiece, and boy, he just changed the way I approached it and everything. And to this day, I do a little bit of. I find that I don't have to do nearly as much of it as I did back then.
Mhm.
I'll touch on it when things start to go awry. And of course, I'm aware of all of these triggers now, and all those things help keep me in place, you know.
Right. They really do, and they really keep Bobby. It keeps you, me, Paul, in the right place for you. because our lip size, our teeth configuration, the tongue size, the volume of air you have, the ability we have to move it out is different in every person. And what the mouthpiece practice does, it gets your body coordinated for your endeavor. Because, we've all seen it. There's no one way to do this. And yet there is a way that will get each individual back to the right way for them. And that's what Jimmy always did. That's what I found that mouthpiece practice always did. And then getting the horn angle right.
Right.
That you have these triggers. And I'm the same way as you. I've gotten to a point that I don't always do as much on the mouthpiece in the morning. I do a bit, the alto horn mouthpiece, the visualizer, and then I usually have my cornet mouthpiece and my pick mouthpiece, and then I have a mouthpiece I use on the B flat and on the C, and so I kind of use a different mouthpiece for each one of the things in my drill, or if I put together some of Jimmy's things. Just by touching on each mouthpiece, I don't pick up the piccolo trumpet and think, it's been a while since I've done this. It feels fine.
Mm-hmm.
And
But you warm up on the mouthpieces in stages, simultaneous, not simultaneous, but one right after the other then?
Yeah, I start on the alto horn mouthpiece. That, as I said, I got from Herseth. And Herseth was like Sidney Meyer at the Eastman School. Bud never told you to do this or do that. He would mention things. And after my, I have a story in a second. After my first lesson, he said, "Okay, Red, what I want you to do," and that was back when I had a lot of hair and it was red. He said, I want you to get a mold made of your teeth. And I said, okay, I've been thinking about that. So I'll see about that. He said, no, that's your assignment for the next lesson. So I went and did it. And every 5 or 8 years afterwards, I did it. But the second lesson, he said, we talk on the porch. He said, okay, Red, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go downstairs and play on my big mouthpiece. Got to play some Bruckner tonight. I thought, oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Well, a month later or so, talking on the porch. Okay, Red, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I got to go downstairs and play on my big mouthpiece. Got to play some Mozart tonight. So I got in the car and I thought, okay, that's 2. And so I went and found the alto horn. And I found that starting on that with the Bach number 3, it's the Bach rim. It's something I'm used to. And there's no big change going to the normal mouthpiece. But I do the big mouthpiece first, and then I do the visualizer second. It's like the lip buzzing. And then with the rest, I'll as I said, I'll do some things on my pick mouthpiece. I'll do some things on my, if I was doing lead things at the bowl, I would put in my lead mouthpiece, and then I'll do something on the mouthpiece I use on the C, and then I always end with the mouthpiece I use on the B flat, because that's how I start to warm up. I've told a lot of people, they say, well, I start on the C. I said, good, so reverse it, do the last mouthpiece, the thing you do on the C, and then that's I found it to be an efficient way of putting it together.
So this is all still before you're putting the mouthpiece in the horn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then when I put it in the horn, I play an F concert because with both Jimmy's drills and my mouthpiece drill, I found doing it on the B flat is better than doing it in concert pitch. Although I have had students who played the C all the time and felt it was okay to do it in concert pitch. That didn't work as well for me. But if I play an F concert and then just add the trumpet while I'm playing an F concert on the mouthpiece, then I'm connecting mouthpiece practice to the instrument. And then the trumpet becomes what it is, a glorified resonator. It's a megaphone. It simply resonates. That's why for me, I've never liked the term buzzing, because bees buzz, chainsaws buzz. I always think of the sound I want on the mouthpiece, the sound I want on the visualizer, because our lips are vibrating. And it's that sound that the horn is going to amplify. So I want to connect the sound. So I'm always thinking sound. When I take a breath, it's not that I think, how do I want to sound? It's like I have this idea in my mind of how I want to sound. Because if you take a breath and play, and you think, oh, that didn't sound too good. Well, it's 1,000 years too late. If you take a breath and you have a clear picture in your mind of what you want to sound like, then the evaluation is, does the trumpet in the hands sound like the trumpet in the mind? So that you're making that connection, because I've always found with students, I don't often have them play a passage on the horn or play a passage on the mouthpiece. What I have them do, if we're working on pictures, and pictures at an exhibition, if we're talking style, well, gee, I'm not sure, because I tend to do this here, and I just say, okay, sing it. Here's the first pitch. And every time, and I think we're all this way, every time they do it, they interpret. And 99% of the time they sing it, and they look at me, and I just say, it sounded great to me, now play it that way, because you're getting in touch with the artist. What we do with the mouthpiece practice before, we're in touch with the artist and the athlete. And we're getting the athlete, as Bobby so clearly said, you get back to the right way for you right away. And it takes away the anxiety, even knowing that. And Bobby, I'm sure you felt that same way, that even if it was a hard weekend, you knew that there was a way to get yourself back, not feeling like, oh my God, I'm trashed for the next 2 weeks, and that's essentially what that approach to starting on the mouthpiece does.
Right.
And then basically, I'm warmed up. A lot of times, I'll just go ahead and start playing, or I will tend to do what I did with Jimmy that spring. Was I was starting to work, and in the fall, I was still doing all of his stuff. I mean, I would spend a good day doing all the things. But then I began to realize, I want something where I do some mouthpiece practice and do his exercises, because I really found them to be so helpful. And so I started combining the exercises. At that time, we were working with da 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 da, of course, but he was always also working with da 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 da. And then ba da 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 da, which I liked a lot, because it reminded me of a vocalist. My wife was a singer, and so I really liked that idea. And so what I did was I combined ba da 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 ba da 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 in C, and then the scale, then the 5/7, and then go down to B. Well, we started putting all this together, and after about 2 months, it came up with what I still give to students. There's part 1 and part 2, this combination of things, but I did it with Jimmy. In fact, the last time I saw him was at the Sportsman's Lodge. There was we're honoring one of the guys, maybe Yuan, who was retiring from the studios. And I saw Jimmy and his wife, and Dawn had never met Jimmy, and so brought her over, and we were talking for a while, and all of a sudden, Bobby, the funny laugh he kind of had, he kind of chuckled, and he said, you're the only guy that ever did that. I said, did what? What did I do? He said, well, remember when you first came down that spring that we started combining a lot of the exercises and things. And I said, yeah, I do. I said, I do it every day, because it's mainly bread and butter stuff. And at the end of part 2, you go into the high range. Well, high range is there. And I said, I've been giving it to a lot of my students. Now, is that okay with you? He said, of course, whatever helps. And I know, Bobby, that sounds like him too. I mean,
absolutely. He was so cool. He was just
he
so
was.
and giving,
Yeah, and it was just, I was relieved because my students loved it so much, and I also showed them all of the mimeograph copies I had of everything. But I would show them this and say, okay, here's the thing you can do as well. But I thought that summed up Jimmy in so many ways. Of course, whatever helps,
Yeah,
and it was always
great at
whatever he could do to help.
he was great at making. I mean, me, I was in high school when I took my first lesson from him still, and he was just really great at making everybody comfortable all the time.
Yeah.
So, hey, I know we are running out of time here. I think Paul's got one last maybe question for you, because we've had a few other we have a lot of questions that come up in our groups, and we
Uh,
like to touch on different things. So why don't you throw this out, Paul?
Sure. Well, we had a recent question asking about just confidence and like psychologically getting freaked out about first entrances coming in accurately. So I'm just wondering if you can, offer any advice for those people that are maybe a little hesitant, like they take a breath and then, am I going to miss it? Am I going to come in? Am I going to clam it? What's going to happen? Any offer advice there you can give us?
well, the first thing is that whatever is in your mind is going to come out the end of the bell. So it's 90% of playing the trumpet is in your mind. The other 10% is just hard work.
Oh, I thought you were going to do like a Yogi Berra. 90% is in your mind and the other half is.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. No, but it really is. 90% of playing the trumpet's in your mind. The first thing is that the advice I always got from my teachers is if you can't hear it, you can't play it. And so this is where ear training and theory class, this is where ear training, playing, doing the mouthpiece practice without, the horn, so that as you're breathing in, you hear the note that you're going to play. Now, quite oftentimes that comes from repetition, but it also comes from working on your ears, like give yourself a pitch and begin to, sorry, my phone is, give yourself a pitch and then sing a phrase. And the way to start there is to, even before you do that, learn to hear intervals. Play a note on the piano, sing the note. Sing a fourth above it. Learn how to sing fourths, perfect intervals, then major intervals, minor intervals. So you're really working on your ears. And then when you go to the instrument, this is where the triggers come in. And I think it's so important that as you're breathing in, you know the sound you want and you hear the pitch in your mind. Because then the trigger is, and for me, it's always a matter of the gum line and not pushing there, but just as a focal point. And then I think ah and sigh, and then just connect air to sound. And just think, connect air to sound. Because if you're hesitating, you're hesitating because you have questions, you have doubts. And this is where in your thinking, like if you have to come in on a high note, say a high C, if you think, boy, I hope I hit that high C, good luck. If you constantly in your practice, you think, this is how I want that high C to sound. That's a different way of thinking, which brings me to a thing that my teachers also always said. They said, never practice, always perform. You're in that mental state of you're sitting on the stage and you've got to play that high C. Well, when you're sitting in your practice room, if you're thinking, okay, this is how I want that high C to sound, you're saying to your body, not, gee, I hope we get that. The body tenses up and you stop the air and everything. In your mind, this is how I want it to sound. And if it doesn't sound that way, you say, no, I want this to be easy. I want it to be flowing. I want it to be my sound. I don't want a high note to sound any different than 2 octaves below. My sound. And then, of course, you get the equipment and everything that will help you with that. But it does come back to the initial trigger. For me, as I said, the gum line on side that relaxes the mask. And then it's just sucking back, up, whatever you're thinking, but connect that air to sound. In your practice, which should be performing, And then what you're doing is you're setting the habit. So then you will try it out in performance, in rehearsals and concerts, in a situation that is safe. You feel secure. And then gradually you'll realize, when I do that, it works. And then you'll begin to have confidence in doing that. And then, as I said, we'll start to do more of what I feel is the most important thing that we need to do, which is just get the heck out of our way and then become the artist, become the musician. But how you do it, when I've done conferences and master classes, a lot of times you get that kind of odd question. Well, what is your philosophy of trumpet playing? And my philosophy of trumpet playing is very simple. Find what works for you and practice. And then never practice, perform with the triggers, but in a setting that you're thinking all the time, this is how I want it to sound. And then you just connect that air to sound and you find that you stop doing funny things because it's all in the mind. It's all, huh?
I was going to say, absolutely. I read another interesting statement from Bill Adam, another
Mhm.
great teacher, right? And
Mhm.
his thing, they were talking about about hearing yourself or when you're not playing well. He says, if you're not playing well,
Mhm.
you can always change the record.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
Hear
thought,
what you want to sound like.
yeah, I thought that was just a great way of saying that. I just want to ask you one question here
Uh-huh.
to finalize things. But tell us, like, I have not heard about this gum line focus. Tell us a little bit about that. What are you thinking about and the purpose of it and all of that?
Well, I came to that with my first teacher, Mr. Resch, who would always say, okay, mouthpiece, and I realized that when I was aware of the gum line, it was a focal point that everything could absolutely grip around.
And are you talking about like the gum right where your teeth, right where they meet your teeth?
Yeah, right where the teeth meet the gum, there's that little ridge.
Right. Okay.
But that's normally where we all play. I find as long as I think about the gum line, I don't put it there or push in, I'm just aware of it, that everything feels very comfortable. As soon as I take it off the gum line, and I've demonstrated this to students with the mouthpiece, everything changes. And the horn, the same thing. And it's just a way of saying, okay, I'm aware of it. Then everything else will grip around it so that there's the gum line. And then the embouchure, the body knows how to do this. Your embouchure will set naturally. It just, everything is right there. And so it gives you a quick trigger.
Well, that's really cool. I'm going to have to play with that one a little bit myself. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. It's been so enjoyable and it's been an absolutely fascinating interview for me to hear you speaking about all this stuff.
Well, Bobby, thank you. And Paul, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it so much. And if I can ever help in the future or any further questions that come up, just let me know and I'll be happy to, help in any way I can.
Wow,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll have to bring you back for part two.
That sounds like fun.
All right.
That
Thanks.
sounds
Thanks
good.
a lot. We sure
Okay.
appreciate it.
All
Take
right,
care.
thanks, Boyd.